Good evening and welcome. Hey, Lyndon. Lyndon's joining us in the background tonight. Hi, everybody. And welcome to tonight's episode of Ask Me Anything Within Reason. A couple of quick things. First of all, I know that this is not Substack, this is YouTube. But first of all, I just want to let you know that over at my Substack, which is called The Good in Us, there's a founding membership, and with that, you get a piece of merchandise. We have a Shopify store that you can check out. I think the link is on our YouTube page. Also, any one of my 3 books, you can get a signed, personalized copy. And a couple other things I don't remember off the top of my head. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because um, it's been a while since I announced the founding membership, and we need to get a way for people to give us their preferences, like t-shirt size or what exactly the personalization is going to be. So we are going to be creating a Google form that we'll be sending to everybody. So to those of you from Substack who are here listening, my apologies for the delay, but that will happen within the next week. Sorry about that. It's been busy. Um, yeah, I mean, there's nothing like having 3 weeks of your life completely disappeared because of a totally preventable disease. Uh, anyway, minor housekeeping. So happy to be here with all of you. It's been a really crazy couple of weeks with the book release. So I haven't been posting as much as I'd like on Substack. I haven't been making as many videos on YouTube as I'd like, but we're getting there. For those who haven't heard, my book will be debuting next week. Number 5 on the New York Times bestseller list for hardcover, and at number 3 for combined print and ebook, which is very, very, very exciting. So, to everybody who's read it and who's um, told people about it, I'm very, very grateful. And also, if anybody who hasn't read it, I I like to think that you'll find it helpful. It is a memoir. It's not a political book. It's not a book about Donald. That's what the first book was for. So I decided to take a deeper dive into my own struggles in the particular moment through which we're all living. And yeah, so I hope it would resonate with people. Anyway, let's get to the purpose of why we're here, shall we? Because it's also been I mean, it's not even 2 weeks since the debate. Time means nothing. Time continues to mean nothing. But in less than 2 weeks, we still have the ongoing horrors in Springfield, Ohio, that are being purposely visited upon that American town by the Republican ticket. Uh, and just, it's every once in a while, I wanna say, we all need to take a breath. But when? When? When can we breathe? But we do have to. So, one of the reasons I like doing this tonight is because I get to not just because I get to answer your question, but we get to spend time on issues. So, oh, just another very quick thing for anybody who read my Substack post tonight. It's essentially about how Donald keeps failing the cognitive test. It's not behind a paywall, so if you wanna head on over there and read it at some point, please do. But, it's also about the test that we face, yet again in this election. And at the very beginning, I try to explain that, as a neurologist has said, the difference with this is back when President Biden was still in the race. The difference between the two is that President Biden was aging normally while Donald was dementing, and the media treated them as if it was the opposite. So somebody I guess misunderstood. I never ever ever believed that President Biden was suffering from any kind of um, serious age-related cognitive issues. I mean, what do I know? I was just basing it on my own observations of his behavior. Donald Trump's behavior is infinitely, infinitely more worrisome. So one more thing the corporate media got disastrously wrong. Um, anyway, let's let's uh let's move on, shall we? Okay, from Michelle, what are we doing about Lindsey Graham in Nebraska trying to flip the electoral vote? Okay, that's a very inside baseball question, but potentially a very important one. As you all probably know, we have this hideous thing called the Electoral College. So states don't just so let's say in New York, for example, um, Kamala Harris, how many people are in New York? I don't know, like around 30 million, I guess. Most of them are right here in New York City. Say it's 30 million. Let's say Kamala Harris gets 25 million votes in New York and Donald gets 5 million. 5 million too many, but most of those would be coming from Staten Island. Okay, so does Kamala Harris get 25 million added to her column and Donald Trump get 25 million added to his column? No, no, no. That would be democracy. That would be one person, one vote. That would make sense. No, we have the Electoral College, and each state has a specific number of electoral votes. So the person who wins the majority of the popular vote, even if it's like, let's say she got 15 million in one vote and he got 14 million and 909, she'd still win all of New York's Electoral College votes. I don't remember. I should know this. I live here. But honestly, I hate the Electoral College so much that I try not to pay too much attention to it. Also, here's the great thing about the Electoral College. There are literally states like mine that don't matter. They don't matter because we know that, I mean, unless something really, really, really bizarre happens, we know that a Republican is not ever winning New York. Just like no Democrat will ever win Alabama. Like, it's just so stupid. Anyway, so Kamala Harris will get all of those electoral college votes in New York. 48 out of 50 of our states does that. 2 states split their electoral college votes. Again, forgive me, I don't know the exact numbers, but the 2 states are Nebraska and Maine, and each state has one electoral college vote that goes to the people who voted in that region of the state. I'm probably not explaining this very well. Maybe because it's just so stupid. Anyway, they split their electoral college votes. I don't know why it's this way, but it has always I don't know if it's always been this way, but it's been this way for a long time. A few months ago, Republicans in Nebraska were making noises that they were going to try to change the law so that the person who won the state would get all of their electoral college votes. Nebraska is a very red state. Who would that benefit? Let me think. Donald. So Democrats in Maine said, well, if you do that, we're going to do the same thing because chances are Kamala Harris would win Maine. So those one split off electoral college votes in Nebraska and Maine would sort of cancel each other out. Great, fine. So the whole thing got dropped. Unfortunately, though, Lindsey Graham has been in Nebraska trying to make this change again. Well, why should that be a problem, right? Yeah, George, yes. Reagan won New York. Reagan was a total outlier. Um, and, was not facing a very difficult opponent. I mean, I still think I've never understood how Reagan and Nixon did as well as they did. It's completely, completely crazy. But by the way, just as an aside, um, a landslide will never happen. Well, I mean, I don't want to say never, but the likelihood of a landslide in this country anymore is it's like practically impossible. Certainly this time around. Anyway, back to Maine and Nebraska. Nebraska Republicans are again, with Lindsey Graham's encouragement, trying to push this thing through. Uh, so Maine should just say that it's going to do the same thing, right? Cancel it out. Well, guess what, folks? Maine has this rule that it takes 90 days for a new law to go into effect. So if they pass the law today at this late hour saying that all of their electoral college votes will go to the winner, likely the Democrat, it won't take effect before the election. Nebraska doesn't have such a restriction. So, I mean, I don't understand if this is a question of Democrats in Maine doing what Democrats always do and just kinda, like, not taking this shit seriously, or maybe they plan to figure out a workaround. Like, look, there's this possibility that Maine Democrats will figure out how to do that. There's also a possibility that Republicans in Nebraska don't have enough votes. And what's completely mind-boggling to me, besides the fact that we have an electoral college, is the fact that, we have to worry about 1 electoral college vote. I mean, that's how close this election is. How? How? Yeah, it just makes you wanna grab people by the lapels and shake some sense into them. Just quick update. I didn't get a question about this because I literally just found out about it, but, I'm sure you've all heard that the lieutenant governor of North Carolina, Mark Robinson, who's also a gubernatorial candidate, uh, is has been, outed for many years ago, posting on a pornography website. Now listen, I don't understand this. Before this happened, the guy was basically telling everybody that he's a Nazi. He's Holocaust denier. He hates black people. He thinks we should bring back slavery. He hates women. He thinks women should not have the right to vote. He thinks like LGBTQ plus people should get the death penalty. I mean, the guy is just vile. He's evil. He's horrible. We knew all of that stuff about him. And you know who else knew all of that stuff about him too? His staff. And yet, apparently, the pornography thing is a bridge too far. His staff is fleeing in droves. He's lost his campaign manager, his deputy campaign manager, and other people. The beautiful thing about this to me is that he missed the deadline for withdrawing. So his name will stay on the ballot, whether or not he stays in the race. He just endorsed Donald Trump. Hey, arrogance makes you stupid. And the guy is he's the same kind of narcissist that Donald is. So I just wanted to share that with you because it's fun. Okay. So Lynn asks, under the law, a felon cannot qualify for a security clearance. So how can Donald even run for the presidency as that position requires a security clearance? Guess what? No, it does not. I find this insane. There are 3 qualifications, or sorry, there are 3 requirements for becoming president of the United States. You have to be at least 35 years old. You have to have been born in the United States. You need to be a natural born United States citizen, and you have to have lived in the United States for at least 14 years. You can be psychotic. You can be an educated rapist. You can be a convicted felon, and you do not have to pass a security clearance. So check this out. This is how broken we are. Donald Trump is unqualified. He would not be able to get any other job in the United States government except the presidency. Go America. Yeah, it's just these are the kind of things that make it a little hard to hang on to sanity sometimes, right? I mean, woof, just it's a little demoralizing. It's not just that he couldn't get a job in the government, any other job in the government, which is true. He couldn't get a job anywhere. Who would hire that? Anyway, who asked this question? Great question from John. What is your take on the National Fraternal Order of Police endorsing Donald? They couldn't even take the neutral position as the Teamsters did, not endorsing either candidate, leaving it up to local chapters to decide for themselves. By the way, I think that the quote unquote neutral position of the Teamsters not endorsing either candidate is it's kind of despicable. The leader of the Teamsters, whose name I forget, for some reason, spoke at the Republican National Convention. So that's a tell. But I mean, come on. Any rational, objective human being knows that Republicans in general and Donald Trump in particular hate unions. So if you're the head of a union, I don't see. I'm tongue tied and speechless. Let's get back to the Fraternal Order of Police, shall we? Yeah, let's put it in the simplest terms first. The National Fraternal Order of Police endorsed a convicted criminal over a prosecutor. Just in case you didn't know, prosecutors are on the same team as other law enforcement and presumably against criminals. But let's put this in context. Donald Trump incited thousands of people to storm the Capitol and attack police officers, 5 of whom died, not that day, but after the fact, and over 170 were wounded, some of them grievously, like John Schnone, for example. I don't get that, first of all. But then think about who some people in law look, it's complicated. We can't paint everybody we can't paint an entire organization with the same brush. However, we had this conversation on the Nerds last week. This is not about one or two isolated bad apples. This is about ideology and training. Okay. So, what do you do when you have a sheriff in Ohio, no less, whose name is Bruce Zukowski, posting this on Facebook? He suggested that local residents should keep a list of homes displaying Kamala Harris yard signs. Quote, so when the illegal human locust, which she supports, need places to live will already have the addresses of the new families who supported their arrival, unquote. Do we seriously think that's why the sheriff wants a list of Kamala Harris supporters? Do we really think that? First of all, this creep who should not have a badge, he should be fired. If he still has that friggin' job, I don't even know what to say. He refers to human beings as locusts, which is what we call dehumanizing. Locusts were a plague. He's very conscious of what he's doing. Very, very, very conscious. And he's basically just, in the most racist way possible, telling, like, I guess people who listen to him, and unfortunately, I'm sure there are a lot of them, that Kamala Harris supports the infiltration of vermin into this country. I mean, it's so yeah, that is not he is not alone. There are plenty of other, wherever Donald goes, there are tons of police officers lining up to shake that scumbag's hand. We have a problem. And the endorsement by the Fraternal Order of Police just highlights it. It's quite something. From Caroline. Why would women still vote for Donald after he took away their bodily rights? It's just mind-boggling. Yeah, it is totally mind-boggling. But misogyny, internalized misogyny is a real thing. I've said this before. Sorry. So sorry. Still have that. God, COVID is just the weirdest thing. I'm still tired and I still have that weird cough. Anyway, so forgive me if I'm drinking more liquid than I normally would during one of these things. So, I grew up in a family of misogynists. My grandfather was the chief misogynist, but what was fascinating, I mean, not fascinating like I knew it while I was growing up, but, fascinating to contemplate when I was an adult, was that my grandmother was also a misogynist, and so was my Aunt Mary Ann, who was a federal judge. Her contempt for women would make your eyes water, and she was completely unconscious of it. And I've often wondered, like, what that did to her own sense of self-worth. Now, of course, most people in my family didn't think they were worth anything, but still, I mean, whew. So, it should not surprise us that in a country that treats women as badly as we treat women, that there would be some internalized misogyny. You add to that the fact that white evangelical, that extremist Christian sects in this country, like white evangelicals, et cetera, believe and preach that women are subservient, that men are superior, that it's the job of women to take care of their men. That will warp you. That will warp you. If you grow up in that and you believe that. And yeah, again, the thread goes by so quickly, but I did see somebody make the point that, some of the greatest proponents against the Equal Rights Act were women. Phyllis Schlafly among them. So, yeah, sad. And we are going to have to do something about it. We really, really are. Okay, from Nick. What words of advice do you have for the powers that be for the probable event that Donald will lose? For example, being prepared for another January 6th event. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Nick. And I'm getting I think we get this question every week, some version of this question every week, but I'm getting more more questions like it because I think people are getting more worried as we should be. Um, well, look, I think as we've seen in Springfield, Ohio, Donald Trump, domestic terrorist, is quite good at engaging in stochastic terrorism, which is simply, well, not simply, but that's when somebody with power um, targets vulnerable groups and stirs up hatred against them, and one of their followers feels empowered to commit violence against people in said vulnerable population. So then the leader can say, I don't have anything to do with it. I didn't. It's like Donald in January 6th, he didn't say they should hang Mike Pence. Yeah, yeah, he did. So, obviously, if hopefully when Donald loses, he is not going to go quietly into that good night. We should only be so lucky. No, no, no. He's already doing this. We see it. He's already saying it's stolen from him. They're cheating. Um it's this person's fault and that person's fault and whatever, and he won't take responsibility and he won't be able to handle the fact that he lost. It will be 2020 all over again, but worse. In terms of the violence of his rhetoric and his vehemence and his rage. What's different this time around? And we have to remember this. What is different this time around? In 2020, Donald was still in the White House. In 2024, President Biden will still be president. Now, obviously, in 2020, Donald wasn't organized. Like, I don't think it ever occurred to him he was going to lose, right? So he wasn't organized enough. And the Republican Party was still kind of on the fence in some ways. They were not comfortable with the big lie. They were horrified, at least for 5 minutes, by January 6th. So it's extremely unlikely that he would have had any traction. I mean, he tried, right? He tried, he failed. Um, I'm sure they've learned a lot and will make a more organized, concerted attempt this time around. But again, they're out of power. That's really important to remember. So I am not worried about an insurrection or, you know, a successful takeover. I'm not. How that doesn't mean I'm not worried about violence. One of the few things Donald likes most is when other people commit violence on his behalf. So, but just please remember that Kamala Harris will be, President Biden will still be in the White House with all of the power of the presidency, and Kamala Harris will be, I can't remember, what is that word? She will be, oh, thank you. I just thanked myself for remembering something that I should not have forgotten. Seriously, COVID. She'll be the president-elect. Donald will be a convicted felon, most likely facing prison because Justice Merchan is going to make his ruling like a week or two after the election. Shelly Ann asked, do you think there's any chance? Oh, look at the timing that Donald's going to prison. Yes, I do. And with the New York case, that will be sooner rather than later. With the federal cases, it'll take longer. But it's it's hard to say with the Supreme Court. Let me put it this way: if Democrats get back into power and get real power, they're absolute. Well, not the first thing they do, but one of the very first things they do. And they could do all of these things simultaneously. They can they can enact the John Lewis voting rights. They can um, vote on national protections for abortion rights, and they can add 6 seats to the Supreme Court. All of those things could happen simultaneously. Okay, from Dottie. Let's see. It's a question about how much American taxpayers spend for Donald's Secret Service protection. It galls me no end that he has it and that his so-called wife has it and that his children have it, but they all do. I don't know the exact numbers, but just for Donald alone, there are 90 to 100 agents protecting Donald. That includes staff and stuff, but to do the math, holy cow, that is not cheap. Okay. I apologize. I don't know who asked this question. So anyway, here's the question. The Supreme Court sat on the immunity case until the last minute and then stunned the world by granting immunity just before their session ended. Yes. What happens if SCOTUS takes an election deciding case, sits on it during the interregnum, then decides in favor of Donald on January 19th? Well, that would be very bad. That would be very bad. I don't know. I honestly, uh, have I mentioned that I have trouble sleeping at night? So thanks for that. No, it's a very good question. I just think back to what happened in 2020. He brought 60 lawsuits and he lost 59 of them, and the 60th was like a negligible thing that had no impact on anything. I don't know why. I hope this isn't naive, but I don't see it happening. I'll think about it some more though. I don't know. I'd be curious to know what you all think. Yeah, it's terrifying. Beverly asked, "Do you think Donald could be adjudicated innocent of all charges against him by reason of insanity?" No, I do not. First of all, insanity is a legal construct. It is not a psychological or psychiatric term. It doesn't mean anything, and like it's not a diagnosis. And first of all, in legal terms, being found not guilty by reason of insanity is very, very rare. And, one of the main criterion for making that finding is that the person did not know the difference between right and wrong, or, was completely unaware of what they were doing. Now, it's not always that simple. I don't wanna go off on too much of a tangent, but, you know what? I'm not gonna go there. But, um, Donald knows the difference between right and wrong. It doesn't matter, like, if a psychiatrist or a psychologist diagnoses him, like, actually puts him, like, through a psychological test battery. Good luck with that. Um I mean, none of what, because the crimes we're talking about happened now years ago. Thanks, Merrick Garland. Um, I mean, no, he knows the difference between right and wrong. He may not think it applies to him because he's so special. He should be able to do whatever he wants. But no, he will not be found legally insane because he is not legally insane. Okay, so I've been getting so many variations on this question. What do you say to people, and the implication being people who are either going to vote for Donald or are still on the fence about whether or not to vote for Kamala Harris? What do you say to make them understand? What do you say to make them understand? Well, there's a significant portion of them. Will he try to plead insanity? No, he will not try to plead insanity because that would look bad. Um, okay, so there are those people who are cult members. There are followers. There's literally nothing he could do or say to get them to change their minds. I mean, at this point, like, come on, right? Um, oh, just as quick aside, Grumpy Cat asked a good question. The best way every Sunday, usually early afternoon, sometimes if I'm running late, later in the day, I put up a post on my Substack. Again, it's called The Good in Us. If somebody could put the link to that in the chat, that'd be amazing. I put a post up on my Substack, which is just a newsletter for those of you who aren't familiar with what Substack is. And you know, I write a post about whatever. Today again it was about, how Donald keeps failing the cognitive test. And just at the beginning I say, "Hey, I'm doing my Ask Mary Anything Within Reason tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern. If you have any questions, put them in the comments." And that's where I get the bulk of my questions because, again, even though you guys ask great questions here, this thread goes so quickly. Like, I would spend most of my time in silence just kind of reading the thread, which is probably not very riveting uh viewing. So I do sometimes try to pick out from your questions, but the other way is easier because I have them in front of me already. Back to getting people to understand. There's, I don't at least 30% of people who can't, won't, don't want to, I don't know. And those, it's probably a larger percentage now. We cannot waste our time on those people. What I'm more worried about, honestly, is people like Brett Stevens, who is an op-ed columnist for the New York Times. This is a man with very, very valuable real estate at his disposal. He was on Bill Maher the other night, along with MSNBC host Stephanie Ruhle. So those two were guests. And I don't know if anybody else was there, but the two of them were at the table with Bill Maher. And Brett Stevens actually said with a straight face that although he will not vote for Donald Trump, he's not sure if he's going to vote for Kamala Harris yet because she has no policy positions. What? Like, that was a Scooby-Doo moment. Right? Are you for real? Like, that sounds like somebody at a Donald rally would say. How can you be as plugged in as somebody who writes an op-ed column for the New York Times actually say with a straight face that Kamala Harris doesn't have any policy positions? What he's really saying is that he's hurt that Kamala Harris hasn't sat down for an interview with the New York Times because apparently that's the only way people could actually have insight into what she's doing is if she sits down with the very serious people at the New York Times. Fuck off, Brett Stevens. Like, seriously. Let's put it this way. Let's say, just for the sake of this argument, even though it is absurd, let's say Kamala Harris has never articulated a policy position during her campaign. Just look at her campaign website, just listen to her. But we're pretending here. We're pretending so we can try to answer Brett Stevens' stupid question for him. She's vice president of the United States. She she's a member of an administration, a very important one, second in line to first in line to the presidency. She has been involved in shaping policy, responding to I mean, come on. Just from that alone, we know we know her position on continuing US support for Ukraine, for example. We know her position on the overturning of Roe v. Wade and what is being done to women in this country because in 26 out of our 50 states, women no longer have any rights over their own bodies. We know these things. Is he like, I don't know. How do you talk to somebody like that? That is just willful ignorance. Yeah, there is no paywall. I mean, you can become a paid subscriber for my Substack, but there is no paywall. Mo like 95% of the time. Another quick aside. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just seems like people don't want to hear it. They just have their own preconceived notions and like how do you even think at this point about somebody who doesn't know? All right. Well, good luck when we all get rounded up and put into camps. I don't know. Maybe pay attention. But if Brett Stevens is like, you understand the conundrum. Also, this is like, don't vote for fascists. The alternate, the flip side of that is vote for people who aren't fascists. See, Brett, he made it very, very simple for you. Anyway, from Carl. Much has been said about your grandfather, but I don't recall anything being said about your grandmother. Was she at all influential in Donald's life? Actually, I wrote a whole book about it. My very first book, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man. I talk at great length about my grandmother's own psychological issues and, her personality disorders and her problematic parenting. So, when I say my family created the world's most dangerous, it wasn't just my grandfather. I mean, he was certainly at the leading edge of it, but my grandmother had a hand. This is the way I describe my dad's generation. My grandparents had 5 children, including my father and Donald. Every single one of those children was a destroyed human being. That's a pretty bad record of parenting, wouldn't you say? Yeah, devastating. So the other thing I'll say quickly is that, hang on. For some reason, this document is not scrolling, and I do not know why. Oh, I do know why. Okay, sorry, we're good. Donald had no respect for my grandmother. And in that way, she had a massive impact on him when he was a small child. But as he grew older, and certainly when he was an adult, she had no influence on his life at all. Catherine asks about the beautifully bound set of books beside me. That is the collected works of Anthony Trollope, published by Folio. The Folio Society. I actually love them, and I'm sorry to say I am missing the very first volume, The Warden. I was reading it. This is many, many years ago. I was reading it, and I have no idea where it is. So I'm hoping that someday I will be able to replace it. Not that I'm planning on selling these books. But, it kind of bothers me, that I'm missing the very first one. Trollope's great, by the way. Just I don't think this is apocryphal. I think this is actually true. Every day, Anthony Trollope wrote 4 pages, longhand, obviously, 4 pages, and then he was done. for the day. He did that every day of the year, which is why he was so prolific. I mean, pretty impressive. Um, okay, question from JP. Since Donald doesn't read, how does he come up with these ideas for authoritative dictatorship? Just talent. It just comes by him naturally. No, I mean, honestly, it's because he grew up in an authoritarian household. My grandfather, in addition to being a sociopath, and I mean that diagnostically, he was also very authoritarian, very patriarchal, and that's what Donald grew up with, and it suited him. My dad was the opposite. Um, let's see. From Kimberly, Republicans win so much because they don't hesitate to fight dirty, and the Dems are too polite. Biden was excellent at the debate, except for that he pulled punches too much early on. Well, okay, so there are a couple of things there, and I apologize. I need to intake some liquid. I completely agree that Republicans don't hesitate to fight dirty. I just want to be more specific. They're perfectly comfortable lying, cheating, and stealing. It's incredible. Dems are too and I mean, yeah, sometimes it's that Democrats are too polite, but I think it's also that a lot of Democrats do not understand the moment we're living in. They don't understand. I don't know why. There's so much evidence. They don't understand what Donald Trump is capable of. They don't understand what their Republican colleagues are capable of. They continue to play by rules that were in a rule book that no longer exists because the Republicans poured gasoline on it and set it on fire. And I mean, I don't think you need to fight dirty, but they need to fight hard. Like, we're not going to lie, cheat, and steal, but we can get down to the mud with them. There should be no politeness here. Like, everything is at stake. I think it's okay, metaphorically speaking, to put on the brass knuckles. I also disagree a little bit. Like, the beginning of the debate for President Biden was horrifically bad. It just was. But bad in a specific way. It was bad because he didn't it's almost like he didn't seem to know where he was. He was very halting. He seemed confused. He was not particularly coherent. But, things got better as the night progressed, for sure. And actually, a friend of mine told me that a colleague of hers at Telemundo told her that people watching the debate thought Biden did do a great job eventually, and that overall he was the winner because they were listening to a translation. So, if you just listen to what he was saying as opposed to how he was saying it. Donald, on the other hand, I mean, I still don't understand. This is just a perfect example of how there's a double standard. Donald was delusional, he lied constantly, and he acted like a freaking fascist. And he won the debate. I mean, one of my biggest problems with President Biden when we did get past the rough beginning was that he was like joking around, like that stupid thing about who plays golf better. Come on. Like, that to me just normalizes and humanizes Donald, and it kind of puts him on the same level. No, no, no. Like, I've said this before. I didn't want President Biden to debate Donald, not because I knew what was going to happen, but because Donald Trump does not deserve to be on the same stage with President Joe Biden. But I agree. Democrats, stop it. You need to fight like all of our lives depend upon it, because they do. And honestly, like, if I were an elected Democrat, I would be freaking out right now, because do you seriously think that if things go south that Democratic politicians are going to be safe? Of course they're not going to be. Of course they're not. Okay. Just a quick thing about, sociopaths and psychopaths. Those also aren't diagnoses. There is a book called the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual from the American Psychiatric Association, and even us clinical psychologists use it for diagnostic purposes. Um, and again, diagnosis, as I've said before, is a process, and you know, the DSM is a guideline in terms of how to come to the conclusions about what's going on with our patients. Psychopathy and sociopathy, again, aren't diagnoses. Those There is a personality disorder, an Axis 2 personality disorder called antisocial personality disorder. Antisocial behavior is criminal behavior essentially. It's not asocial, it's antisocial. So any whether it's narcissism or depressive personality disorder or bipolar, what have you, not bipolar, borderline, all of these things occur on a continuum. You could have very mild version of it or a very extreme version of it. So what we think of as sociopathy and psychopathy are at the extreme ends of antisocial personality disorder. Not going to diagnose Donald, but I don't think he would be wrong to say that he exists on the extreme end of that continuum. You know, I think that's fair. Um, it seems like this is from Trust the Dog. Seems like my dad and Marianne were very bright. What happened to Donald? Dropped on his head. Uh, Something about the mashed potatoes. I don't know. I think it's a lot of things, right? It's possible that not everybody's smart. Possible that just Donald is naturally not a particularly bright person. Also, um, he grew up in a family that had no interest in art or music. The stuff that make life reading. So he has no intellectual curiosity, which I think makes it impossible to be uh, smart. Um, he My grandfather eventually, I mean, it took a while, but eventually, sort of bolstered Donald's false sense of his own superiority. So think about it. If you think you're great and then other people tell you all the time that you're great, what do you need to try for? Right? So we never had to try. But yes, my dad, Marianne was not brilliant by any stretch, but yes, she worked hard. Um, she had help along the way, certainly, but she did have some success. My dad, though, was what I would say the only self-made person in his family. Remember, he got his personal and professional pilot's licenses when he was in college, and at the age of 25, he became a professional pilot for TWA at the dawn of the jet age. With not just no help from his family, but the active contempt of his family. So, pretty cool. From Lynn, why don't Donald's adult kids step up and get their dad the help he needs? Well, because they don't care, first of all, and secondly, he's more valuable to them being out in the world, you know? It's all transactional with these people. Um, you know, they don't care about him. They do not care about him, and he doesn't care about them either, which, that in itself should be disqualifying, but yeah, we live in a very weird country. Yes, I blame Fred Trump too. Fred Trump was a horrible person. He wasn't I mean, I could be wrong about this, but to my knowledge, my grandfather was not physically abusive, but he tortured my father psychologically and emotionally and did not give a shit about the rest of his children until he needed Donald to fill the void left by my father. Um, again, stuff I talk about at length in both my first book and my new book, Who Could Ever Love You? Who Could Ever Love You is more about my dad, actually. But yeah, I don't understand. Well, you know what? I to be honest, I don't think anybody survived. I don't think anybody in my family survived really. Certainly not unscathed, you know. Well, very broken people. Donald is broken irreparably. And the idea of handing him power is just a terrifying thought. From Diabetic Aaron, I read Mary's first book, but kind of tired of Donald. Well, then you should read my new book because Donald is not in it at all. Unfortunately, because of the way it goes, like whenever I have an interview about it, they take like the one of the 3 passages of the book that are about Donald, but it is not about him. He rarely makes an appearance in the new book, which was actually great for me too. Not that it was an easy book to write, but I didn't have to deal with him, and it was kind of like a vacation. Um, question. So from Lisa, I've read a study that people that are sociopaths, psychopaths are missing a part of the brain. The rest of us, well, look, I mean, or also Benita asks, are psychopaths born, sociopaths are molded? Again, not technical terms in the world of psychology. I think I personally don't I think it's a distinction without a difference, honestly. Um, yes, like anything else, like there are extremes. There are people who um are born missing something, who are born without empathy. And they're dangerous people. But then, there are people who are sociopaths who are just, Fortune 500 executives. You know what I mean? They live by the rules of society and they just, they do whatever they need to do to enrich themselves or what have you. Um, but, I think it's like anything else. It's nature or nurture. It's rarely only one. Um, Ted Bundy, who was one of the most prolific and evil serial killers in this country, was horrifically abused as a child. Would he have been just fine if it hadn't been? I don't know. I don't know, but it didn't help. Just like I don't think Donald was capable of being a good person necessarily, but he didn't have a chance. Um and it's just very difficult to know. Obviously, as we learn more about the brain and we can do more scans and stuff like that, I maybe we'll figure it out, but we still know very, very little about the human brain. Let's just put it this way. If we don't want to decrease the chances of turning somebody into a psychopath or a sociopath, raise them with love, kindness, and empathy, and make sure their needs are met. How's that sound? Oh, and hug them. Hug them. Let's see. Oh. Oh my goodness. It's almost 7 o'clock. See, this is what happens when I have to scroll through the feed. I miss 1, I stop talking, and 2, I forget to keep an eye on the clock. But, yes, we still have not been paid by Mexico, and there's still very, very little of the wall. I'm sure, just like his concept of a plan for healthcare in America, Donald will get right on that as soon as he now, I was gonna say the unthinkable. We're not gonna let him back in the White House ever, right? Let's just pledge that that we're not going to let that happen. Okay, so this time totally flew by. It was so wonderful to be with you again. And just for this week coming up, I'm going to be on Lawrence O'Donnell tomorrow night to talk about my book, which I think Lawrence is amazing. So I'm always happy to be on his show. He's really just doing incredible work. And obviously we'll be back with the nerds Tuesday and Thursday. Keep an eye out for Jen Taub and Danielle Moody's YouTube channels to see what they have scheduled. And I think that is it for tonight. So thank you all for being here. And I will see you at the nerds. I'm like dragging my feet a little bit because I feel like there's something else happening. And I can't remember what it is because COVID. Anyway, I hope you had fun tonight, and I know I did, and I'll see you Tuesday at noon. In the meantime, please stay safe and be kind. Talk to you soon.